Welcome to An Intellectual Life with Cait and Kaelyn, where we discuss lifelong learning and delve into the day-to-day of a scholar in the making. Today is our first episode, and I'm super duper excited to be here today. Let's dig into it. I'm excited.
I just love that this is the fruition of like 2 years worth of discussing whether or not to start a podcast. So yeah, here we are, guys.
It has been so long in the making, and I'm so excited to kick us off. This is going to be our first session. We are going to be talking about how to live an intellectual life. But before we dive in, Kaelyn, we haven't spoken to each other like all week, which is unheard of. Absolutely unheard of.
I did like intentionally hold back on the voice notes this week because I was like, oh, but then I have to have things to talk to Cait about on the podcast, and this would be so much more fun to talk about and have others here. But you did hear about my random run-in with a man on Friday at the bookstore.
I mean, as I was listening to this voice note, I was just thinking to myself, you know what? I love the confidence, just the absolute, utter confidence of being able to approach someone in a bookstore and be like, hey, let's grab a drink. Let me get your number. I mean, what is that? In what line?
It was so smooth. Like he's done this a million times before.
I wonder what the success rate is.
I'm so curious. I wish I'd asked.
Well, speaking of bookstores, why don't we dive into what we are calling our weekly digest, which is a set of 4 questions about what we are doing this week. So for this podcast, Kaelyn, what are we drinking? What have you got?
I will be honest. I did order an ube latte earlier. I did not think about the fact that I probably should let it last until this podcast recording. I chugged it. So it's now gone. So now we're just stuck with water, but it was delightful. It was a fun little drink when it lasted for the 30 seconds that it was in my possession.
I love that. I have gone well traditional with a mango and bergamot tea today.
Ooh. I wouldn't say that's traditional. Like a cup of tea for you in the afternoon at 3:00. That makes
pretty normal.
But a little mango moment. That's
a little mango
different.
moment. You know, it's the sunshine. It's kind of summer. It's a little bit fruity, a little bit fun.
I dig it.
Yeah. So it's definitely a change from my usual Irish afternoon tea. So
yes. Oh well, that's very fun. I don't think I've had like a proper fruity tea in quite some time. Ever since I moved to the UK, I feel like the English breakfast and the Earl Greys have just like taken over my palate.
And that is the way. That is the way. I mean, I feel like we could have a whole episode about tea.
And we should.
Tea. We absolutely should, because I have some strong feelings about tea. As you well know.
You see, my brain immediately went like East India Company. I'll talk about the history of tea.
And I'm just like, I prefer Irish breakfast tea. There is a discussion about East India Trading Company and colonization in there. Definitely.
Do you know that the East India Company still has like a storefront in London?
Yes. I walked past it the other day and I was shocked. I actually took a photo.
It's funny. I actually did like a little bit of a deep dive a while back. Anyway, this is taking us completely off course. I did a deep dive. It basically, it's like passed on ownership. So it's not actually owned by the same like original people, but I just feel like a rebrand was probably needed.
I would love for them to turn it into like a coffee shop or you know, like a cafe. How great would that be?
Yeah. And like, let's also have like a museum. Like let's
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway,
yeah. Let's move on.
What are you reading?
What am I reading? Oh my goodness. Okay, so I've got 2 things I want to talk about today.
Okay.
So, oh my goodness, I'm falling. Yesterday I finished Set the Dead. Not in focus. There it is.
That's a beautiful copy.
Thank you.
Wait, is that? Now I'm curious with the dust jacket off what my copy looks like. I don't think it looks like that.
No, this is the limited edition copy from Kenny's bookshop. There were only 1,000 made. So my copy here is copy number 546.
Fabulous.
With my little inscription from her when I went to meet her.
I also got to go to event, and all she said was, for Kaelyn and your poor sore finger.
Bless her. She is the most incredible person ever. But yes, so I finished this. I want to save this for my thought part, but I did finish that. And then the other book that I am reading is part of my Humanist Readers book club, which is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. First Marquez that I've ever read. I'm only a few pages into it, but let's see how it goes. I'm excited. I'm excited to see where it takes me.
Okay, so
what are you reading?
I'm reading a million things, but I narrowed it down to 3 that are like the primary focus at the moment.
Love it. Yes.
I was really good at the beginning of the year of reading one at a time, and then there just so happened to be a lot of releases in the last like 2 months that have thrown things off course. And anywho, first I am slowly working my way through Representations of the Intellectual by Edward Said.
Oh yes, I'm desperate to read it. Yeah,
it's okay. I am really enjoying it. It's not quite what I was expecting.
Fair.
But I'm not terribly far in yet. Because I thought it was going to be more around like the kind of history of the debate and public intellectuals. If you think like Noam Chomsky and Buckley, and like I thought it was going to be more around that. And it's not that part doesn't exist. I think it's because I was reading Carr's What is History, and he talks about the intellectual and the role of the intellectual in like the post or like in the post Cold War era. So I am really enjoying it, but I'm trying to like dissect it very slowly. I've got a bunch of marginalia going on.
Love.
So I'm just taking my time with it. I've been reading it at the start of the day. And then I am back in Eric Larson's world, reading Dead Wake, which is about the last crossing of the Lusitania, which it is so beautifully written. It is so, his writing as a nonfiction writer, it is so completely immersive and so human. And so that he toggles between descriptions of the point of view of the captain of the Lusitania and like his kind of background, what he was doing the morning of boarding, and then it flips and then it talks about like German subs and the U-boats and their strategy and how it is that they've been operating in and around the British Isles at the time. And it's just a lot of detailed history that I had never delved into before. And I highly recommend it, especially if you're somebody that is really fascinated by like Edwardian era boat travel. If you're obsessed with the Titanic like I am, then this is the book for you. And
which is also going to be an upcoming episode. Just everyone know that we are going to be talking about the Titanic in one full episode. So
yes. And then the last one, I saw an influencer on Instagram who lives in London, and she had talked about People in Love by Claire Daverley.
Oh, interesting. Haven't heard of it.
It's okay. I like just a mild side note. I like kind of hate, but I also do it. Like whenever you have something that is like a really true like human account of miscommunication, love, friendship, that it immediately gets like the comp to normal people.
Yes. Yeah.
And on one hand, I think that that's a compliment to Sally Rooney, that she produced a novel that is so human in nature that anything that even comes close is immediately comped to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, everybody comps their book to freaking normal people. Like any literary fiction that deals with miscommunication and friendship and love, immediately normal people.
I mean,
and
it's
so
the first thought that came into my head when you started describing it. I was like, oh, like normal people.
Yeah, but then my concern with the constant comp to normal people is that some of them like really miss the mark. This book is not one of them. This is delightful. This well, actually delightful might not be the word. Basically, the main female character has had this like childhood best friend that she grew up next to, that you know that they've had some kind of falling out and they have not seen each other in 12 years. And now she's engaged and she like sends him an email out of nowhere, like kind of inviting him to the engagement party. And despite him living in New Zealand at this point, he shows up.
Curious.
It's very well written. I can hardly put it down. I think I'm gonna like finish this today because I'm already, I don't know, 150 pages in, and I started last night.
So it's quite a nice like easy read. It's not too difficult.
Yeah,
you know?
And at this current stage of my life, I need some easier.
You need some easier
books to work with.
Yes, I totally feel that. I totally feel that. I tend to have gone in the complete opposite direction, which is why I'm leaning into the next segment, which is my thought that I want to bring to our discussion today. Because having finished Said the Dead, I am absolutely obsessed with this idea of fiction and non-fiction writing being intertwined with each other. Mm-hmm. And this idea of not historical fiction, because historical fiction takes history and bases it on and creates fiction based on it. So the history sits in the background and the fiction takes the forefront.
Yeah.
What Negrofi has done here is so much more than just historical fiction, because the center of the book itself is this idea of history, of voices, of narratives that are coming through in the archives. And for those that don't know about this book, I would highly recommend it. Essentially, it centers around case books that she uncovered of the Cork City Asylum, and centers around one of the doctors who wrote the case books, who was the first female doctor in Ireland of the time. Lucia.
I did not know
Lucia
that.
Fitzgerald.
I didn't know that element.
Yeah. So it's very fascinating. It's really interesting to read because Cork at this time is undergoing a huge amount of historical changes, not just in terms of the rebellion that is being pushed back by the Irish against English rule, which features very heavily in the book towards the end of it, but also in the way that psychology is being looked at in terms of medical practice, and how talking therapy, which Lucia and her husband sort of pioneer as a couple, kind of comes into play. Now, the fiction element of this book is secondary. The fiction element is in the reader themselves being present along these narratives.
Yes.
And I find that such a compelling way to talk about history, to talk about writing, to talk about the events of the past, because we have this kind of sense, there seems to be this sense, this distant removal between us in the present and history. And I think that's a big problem that a lot of societies are facing, is that history almost seems fictionalized because of the distance that we give it.
Okay.
And what I love about what she has done is she brings us into history. She brings us into the room when discussions are being made. She brings us into the room when patients come in. And so it's not that we're sitting there judging as an outside party amongst characters, but we're actually a part of the story and a part of the unfolding. For me, I think that is so nuanced and very, very exciting, and definitely a trailblazing way to start writing in this kind of style that is being seen more and more frequently.
Yes.
Fitzcarraldo have just released a book called The Towers, very similar.
Was that the one, Mary Queen of Scots, or is that a totally different book?
I think it's a different one. I can't quite remember, but yes, it's, these kind of things are coming. These are coming forward in the publication space, and I just find it a really, really fascinating way of looking at that. So that's my thought for this week.
I find it really fascinating because as somebody who's been trained between history and Black studies, the historians, I think somewhat rightfully so, have a lot of skepticism about the speculative.
Of course,
and the ethics of the speculative. But I remember having a conversation with one of my committee members because we were preparing for comprehensive exams, and we were talking about the books on these lists, and this particular historian is quite against speculative practice in historical research, and was trained very much in the kind of early American tradition of reading from the document itself and really not like trying actively to question your interjection. And he had turned to me, like I was in this room of other PhD students, and he basically says, well, but how does that work for you? As somebody who's like working on the history of slavery. And I said, well, if there's no element of speculative history, then the field of Black studies does not exist, or at least the field of Black studies, like within my time period, does not exist, because a lot of their voices, a lot of Black subjects don't have subjectivity in the archive itself. And so we don't, even through the lens of somebody else, I haven't read Said to the Dead yet, but I attended the talk, in which case there was a discussion about, what did she believe her role to be in the archive. And I thought she put it really beautifully, that she's like, well, I kind of allow the people in the record to speak through me. I'm not speaking for them, but I am copying their words into this book that's now going to be read by a broader audience. So in a way, it's like, I don't even think she didn't use the word messenger, but it's almost like a transporter. Somebody who's like directly taking the quotes themselves, and even in looking through the notes of the doctor and not necessarily through the firsthand account of the patient, there's abstraction in that you have to parse through. But in my field, there's that degree of abstraction is a number. It's not about an individual and their lived experience. There's so much that you have to parse through non-documentary material and through a speculative framework. And I think that I agree with something she said at the talk, which was essentially that I think the field of history and people that engage with historical documentation kind of oscillate between this desire for objectivity and trying an attempt at a removal, and those that really lean into the subjective and the speculative. The challenge that I have as somebody who studies history is that I have seen accounts where somebody's presence is manipulating the historical record in an unethical way. And so it's like the boundary, and I don't know like necessarily what I would say is the regulation, or like what would we term like an ethical
check or a balance. Yeah.
I don't necessarily know. I think that's entirely, that in and of itself is entirely subjective, because somebody like what was her name? It's not Mary Builder. It's another one. Something Warren. Oh, that's gonna drive me crazy. She wrote the history on New England Bound. It's about slavery in New England, and she wrote this article that I like. It went too far.
Yes, in the speculative space, right?
Yeah, and you could feel her presence too much in the document and in the judgment of the historical record, and that's when we have to kind of determine for ourselves, like, is this something that I agree with, or is this something that I don't agree with? And I think that's actually the beauty of I guess just like the general intellectual tradition of the academy, is that for someone is not far enough, and is actually it's really allowing for a certain type of interaction with the past, and then to somebody else like myself it's like too far. So then you have responses and critiques of that.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting. I think she actually achieves that balance incredibly well throughout the book. Because she's constantly questioning herself. She's constantly questioning her position being there, which I think is really, really amazing. I think the nuance is not so much the speculative side, is more actually highlighting from the archives that the subjects are people, and they're people with emotions. They're people with very high emotions, given the context of what we're looking at, which I find fascinating. I was having this discussion with Natalie, the host of Talking Tudors podcast, and we were talking about Anne Boleyn and the letters that her jailer Kingston wrote to Cromwell during her imprisonment before Henry VIII, before she was beheaded. It was truly fascinating in that discussion that there's been such a characterization built up about Anne and about her role in England's history, which isn't to be underplayed, obviously, because it's very, very important. But in those letters, you and again, there's secondhand knowledge, third-hand knowledge that we're getting of her words or her emotional state. But you kind of forget, in a way, with so much swirl about her, that she is a person. A person that was experiencing a range of emotions in a very, very short space of time. But I mean, I feel like we could talk about that for ages. These are the thoughts that have been occupying my mind. My shower thoughts. What thoughts have been occupying your mind?
I keep thinking about maps. So we'll talk about this more in the museum episode. But I went to the National Gallery and I went to the Queen's House last week, and I just felt myself really drawn to looking at the presence of maps in portraiture. In the 16th century, there's like the Armada portrait that's very famous, but I saw a painting at the Queen's House of these two men pointing to a map, and you can see in very, very faint letters that it says China, obviously upside down because it's facing them. But in like quite like bold text, but obviously very small in print, is Canton, and they're pointing to it. And they just like immediate knowledge that, oh, this is something related to the East India Company. And then all of these questions are kind of swirling around my head of, one of like knowledge of geography, because the Armada portrait in particular, like the map, it's not quite distinct. You can't quite tell which continent she's pointing to, whereas this one, it's very evident. And obviously this is like about 150 200 years later, so it's slightly more sophisticated readings of geography. So that I thought was interesting, but also I was wondering, how many of these types of portraits were painted, how were they distributed, or were they in people's houses? Was this something that was used as propaganda? Like, I just have all of these like swirling questions about these artworks related to these trade companies, because, and I think like there's a logical kind of connection, which is that I study the Virginia Company and the Royal African Company. And the Virginia Company didn't really use portraiture, but they used pamphlets in order to, hold up their mission in an attempt to draw in investors and increase faith in the project and all of that. But I was just so curious about the portraiture in relation to the East India Company, because I don't see it in relation to like the Virginia Company to the same extent. So that's what's rolling it around in my brain at the moment.
It's so fascinating, because I would love to know, and I don't know this off the top of my head, but at the time that the Royal Academy was starting to put on their exhibits, where they had multiple paintings in that, I'm not sure when that kind of kicked off. I have a feeling it's more 17th century than it is 16th century.
I feel like, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's more of an 18th century phenomenon.
It might be. Yeah, I can't for the life of me think about the time that those exhibits started hitting the scene. But I wonder how much of I wonder how much of that really contributed, because it'd be so interesting to see whether with these paintings, with these maps being portrayed in these paintings, I always find it so fascinating with paintings. Who is the intended audience? If you look at the Armada, for instance, it is very evidently a propaganda painting. It is showing Elizabeth at the height of her power and silencing her critics for being a woman king, in inverted commas. And the defeat of the Armada shows her capability. But I think you were talking about the Holborn painting. Is that the one that you were talking about with the two men pointing at the map?
I stupidly didn't take a picture of the plaque, so I don't know.
I think it might be the Holborn painting.
But... No. Actually, no. I'm not talking about the Explorers. I'm not talking about the
Holbein. Okay.
No. It was a different painting. The Holbein I did see at the National Gallery. In which case, what's interesting about that one is that the map, you can see on the very top edge, Brazil, which, that's only it was only painted 30 years after the colonization of Brazil by the Portuguese. And so the fact that they're, very evidently concerned with and aware of Brazil's power spreading across the Atlantic. Anyway, that's what's on my brain right now.
I think it's so fascinating. I think that's such a very, very cool thought. I suppose it's really hard to follow that with what is something that you're favoriting this week?
What's my favorite this week? It's not a thing as much as it is a practice. I got to spend time with my friend Andrea this last week, who I met online over a year ago. And it was my first time getting to actually see her and hang out with her in person. And I got to take photos for her and got to get some content. She just published her latest book, her 10th novel. And so I was helping her get some promo material for it. And I just remembered how much I really love taking photos of other people. I haven't really had the chance to do it recently because I just don't have very many friends in London that enjoy it or that would want to make a day of it. So it was just really fun. It just reminded me how much I really like playing with my camera, and I really like the just when you see somebody finally like relax and you see them start to enjoy getting their photograph taken, and you see them actually look at a photograph and they're like, oh my God, like I actually feel beautiful. Like that moment, I think is just, it's so special. And yeah, I was really pleased with the photos that I took, but also the fact that she started to feel more comfortable having her photo taken, and I could see her relax in the photos. And yeah, so that my favorite is not a thing. It's
that
practice.
Moment.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so oh, it's lovely. It's and Andrea is such a lovely person, and yeah, it looks like you guys had so much fun. Just darting around London, having
it was nice.
having some time.
It was just really nice to like pretend to be a tourist again.
I really love that. Like being a tourist in your own city is just, it's such a gem.
Yeah, you don't get to do it very often, so it was really special. What's your favorite of the week?
My favorite of the week is a painting that I got back. I bought it from a wonderful artist whose name now Joanna is the artist. A while back, and it's basically this painting of Medusa reimagined as a guardian. So it obviously relates a little bit to my research, this idea of redefining what the narrative is when it comes to what literature sees as female villains.
Yeah.
And I bought this painting a while back, and it was being framed because I wanted it in a really beautiful frame. And it arrived back this week, and I am so, so excited now to put it on my gallery wall, which is sitting in front of me. So that is my favorite thing this week.
Aw, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So, next question. What is your goal for the week? Next week.
Yes. So for this is obviously pre-recorded. So for those of you curious about timing, this is the middle of June. So I have the goal of submitting a complete draft of chapter 4. So I had planned on sending a full draft like a week and a half ago. And as I was working on it, I was like, oh no, this chapter is a beast. There's no way I'm going to be able to get everything that needs to be in here crammed into a digestible draft that I can finish in enough time. So I had emailed my advisor and had checked in and basically said, here's a placeholder, but I'm going to need a little bit more time. And the plan is to get it over to them this week. And yeah, I'm actually really excited about it. There's a section in that chapter that I wasn't expecting to write. I found some new source material, and it was actually very fun to work with and fun to like parse out what my ideas were, and it just felt like it came together. So I'm excited to finish up the draft and to send it off to them and to start working on the next chapter. So that's my goal, is to send off chapter 4 and to start just kind of getting some ideas down for chapter 5. What's your goal of the week?
Kind of similar. So I had a very productive meeting with my supervisor last week. I have just finished up my annual review, so I'm officially into my second year of my PhD, which is wild.
Yeah.
The time is just flying by. But I have to have 10,000 words drafted by September. I have 9,000 words already drafted, so I'm not really worried about that. But there is one section of my current chapter that I'm really struggling with, which is ultimately comes down to the philosophy of poetry.
Okay.
And it's very complicated, it's very abstract, and it's very, very difficult to bring that idea of sort of literary pictorialism into words and justify it almost as a methodology for my ultimate case studies of the Fairy Queen. So I think my focus for the week, and for probably the next coming weeks is going to be on getting that down. I picked up a book from the library which is called Literary Pictorialism. It was written in the 1960s.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it is so dense. It's so heavy.
With a name like that, I would expect no less.
And written in the 1960s, you know what? I really admire academics back then. Honestly, this is like, I feel like there is a difference in terms of the amount that they ended up writing on a subject that feels so difficult to kind of narrow down. But I spent 3 hours reading 11 pages last week. Yep. So
yep.
So let's aim for another 11 pages this week, you know, see how far we can get by the end of the week. I will report back how many more pages we end up reading of this ridiculously intense book.
I relate. Every theory class I took had, yeah.
Absolutely.
You're not the only one.
No. Okay, so now we are going to move on to our next section, which we are going to term the seminar. This is going to be the meat of our section. This is where we're going to get into our particular discussion points, although I feel like we've really hit down on our discussions already, which I love so much. But the focus of this first episode is on living an intellectual life and how to live an intellectual life. This is something I spoke about in a recent YouTube video, and it has been really, really interesting to kind of see the reception of this, the idea of what it means to have an intellectual life. And I essentially foregrounded it with this idea that it is a life that encompasses learning no matter what stage of life that you're in. And incorporating learning into the day-to-day. And so I wanted to ask you to kick us off. What do you think, what do you do, or how do you incorporate learning in your day-to-day life?
So first and foremost, I think it's about being able to identify and act on a curiosity. So having questions and not just kind of letting them flitter away. And I really loved that there was a YouTube video I recently watched about like basically trying to like capture and process ideas. And they said, you know, you really need to make sure that you have a note or something where you can write down these questions. And I actually just decided that instead of just putting things on my phone, I put a little like mini passport notebook in my bag to always have with me, and just a way to, you know, write down the question as it comes. And if you can't process it right then and there, then returning to it and having a ritual of sorts where you do return to it at regular intervals and take time to explore them. But as I was thinking about this episode, I was also contemplating that exploring one's curiosity can also, in a way, like center the ego a bit too much. That we often are exploring things that we already have kind of preconceived notions of or preconceived interest in. And I was thinking that actually one of the best ways to incorporate learning in your day to day is to in some ways to constantly put yourself up against the things that you perceive to dislike. That you have this perception of misunderstanding or that you don't like it. And so you tend to avoid it because in disliking something, there is a discomfort in having to interact with it. And over the past several years, basically since I started getting back into reading fiction, I have really tried to challenge my own ideas of what I don't like to read. So I used to be somebody that says I don't like reading fantasy. I don't read fantasy. I don't read sci-fi. I don't read crime. I don't read horror. And now what I'm actually trying to do is question why I have that idea and try to push myself a bit to learn about the things that I don't feel terribly comfortable understanding. And for me, that's honestly been the past like year or so. It's mostly been like modern history. I have always really found fascination in the 17th and the 18th century, early America, to an extent, the Gilded Age and the Edwardian era. But basically, once we hit like 1914, I'm like, okay, I've had enough.
I'm up. Yeah.
This is just like, isn't my area. I'm not that interested. And yeah, I've just tried to challenge that, because I think that most of the time the reason that we say that we dislike something is because we've been put in a situation where somebody knows more about it and has a vested interest in it. We feel uneducated, and so we back away because we don't want to feel challenged in our lack of knowledge. And I don't think that's always the case. I don't think that that's, just blanket term why we don't like things. For example, I have a very vivid imagination. When I read things that are horrific, I will dream about them, and that's not pleasant. But trying to challenge yourself to not just explore the curiosities, but lean into the discomfort as well.
I'm curious about this because I definitely agree with you. I think there is, and I think it comes down to that idea that learning creates tension. Yes. And that tension is absolutely necessary for us to grow and develop as people, right? So I'm curious about, as a follow-up to that, is how has this helped you? Have you found like there have been areas that you would previously not have dived into that you have now found like a new, not maybe necessarily love of it, but maybe a new appreciation for it?
I think in setting such like black and white terms for what we like and what we dislike, we create barriers to connection with others. Yeah. So, for example, I'll admit that I would feel kind of judgmental towards people that would read fantasy or that would read particularly like romance. And would think that it was essentially like a waste of time and energy and effort to read, for example, a contemporary romance novel by comparison to reading, I don't know, Jane Austen. Like, it was very snobby of me. And in embracing the subjects that I don't feel comfortable with and that I haven't in the past claimed to appreciate, I just feel like I have such a better or like more empathetic stance on other people's taste. For example, I used to be very anti-lit fic. Like, I would look at the things that you would read and I was like, no, she's like, it's too smart for me. That's like, it's like Kate's just got a different brain. I don't think I can process this. It's just not for me. And it's not that you have to necessarily like it or enjoy it, but learning to embrace it and try to figure out like, what is it that somebody understands or appreciates about this that I might have gotten wrong, and trying to essentially just like divorce a little bit of the judgment and the ego in the act of learning. So instead of learning for the sake of, if it looks good or if it makes me feel smart or if it makes me look smart, embracing learning for the sake of being curious and the sake of wanting to understand more and wanting to have a broader like worldview, a broader understanding of humanity. That's what it's done for me. I think it's made me a bit more empathetic.
I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is that in learning there is exposure to something that we may not have had exposure to in the past. Because if we knew it all, then we wouldn't want to go and learn it, right? We would never have that drive, that curiosity. And it's interesting because I have just finished reading a book, which is a murder mystery. It's not something I would usually pick up at all. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. All of a sudden, I was like, well, this is actually really, really fascinating because it's problem solving. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think it's kind of understanding that my original resistance to something like that is the idea of it being centered on murder. And understanding, that's not necessarily the case, is that it's actually in the background of a lot of what is being discussed, and it's more an exploration of humanity. But I think it's really interesting because there is this perception in today, in social media, online, about this idea of intellectualism as a farce, intellectualism as being shown off. And this is something that I think is kind of coming, well, it's not even coming, I think it's here. I think it's in popular culture already. The idea of like Dior and these designer houses making bags looking like books, and someone like Dua Lipa being on the panel for the Booker Prize, for instance. All of a sudden we are getting this intertwined idea of popular culture with literature and with learning. And there has been some very strong criticisms against that idea. And it's the high-low art argument that seems to permeate throughout this idea. But I thought it was very, very interesting. Right at the beginning of the year, there was this big trend on personal curriculums and this idea of self-learning, which drove me absolutely crazy, because I can tell you that I have been doing this for 5 years. I have been self-learning for 5 years. We did not call it a personal curriculum 5 years ago. We just called it getting on with it.
Okay.
But I think it's really interesting because there is a part of me that thinks, well, fabulous. Not only are we getting a drive for people to engage in learning something that they may not know about, but we're keeping each other accountable through social media. It's reshifting, it's rechanging on what that looks like. And I will never be the person that criticizes someone for putting together a personal curriculum, because by all means, do what you need to do to engage in that discomfort, to engage in that learning. But it does not have to be a personal curriculum. As you say, it can just be reading something that's out of your comfort zone. It does not, you don't have to have this idea of scholarly interaction, but you do have to have a sense of engagement. You do have to have a sense of having a dialogue with whatever you are learning, whatever you're reading, whatever you're viewing, whatever you're engaging with. And this kind of ties into this idea of how the trend of intellectualism on social media has been attacked, has been sort of put forward as an idea of diluting art, diluting intellectualism. And I'm very curious what your thoughts are on that, because we're both in the social media space. We are both in those study spaces. We're both in the intellectual spaces that these debates are existing in. And there is the discussion that has to happen about AI and how that is coming in and impacting the way that we are looking at intellectualism in a broad sense.
Okay, I'm just going to riff, and I don't have a fully formed thought. But first, I think, is the desire to create the structure. So on the one hand, I understand the desire to create a syllabus, to create a schedule, in order to provide some kind of boundary, I suppose, or to set some goalposts. The challenge is that I don't actually think that necessary structure allows for intellectual curiosity to just kind of run its course. And I'm of two minds about this, because in a course where you're being led by an instructor and you're engaging in seminar, there are set readings. Like, there's an intention to the way that instructors, scholars construct their curriculum. And it's not just about the list itself. It's the lesson, it's the progression. As a historian, a lot of times it's about the progression in historiography and trying to teach you about the evolution of method and things of that nature. So on the one hand, I appreciate the structure. The question, I suppose, that I have is, like, what's the intent? And part of the intent that I guess, like, I just have a little bit of resistance to is the idea that the learning, like, has a boundary. It has like a point of ending, you know, like, I'm going to create a 6-week curriculum, and by that time I'll have mastered this particular subject, or something along those lines. And I don't think that that's necessarily the thought process. It's just like my thoughts as I'm watching the trend emerge. The other desire for there to be a particular kind of, like, output. The other thing about it being a trend is that, and I this is not a fully formed thought, but on the one hand, I think that the challenge that I have with it as a creator and as somebody who, like, engages in the scholarly space of academia, however you want to define that, is that it's the list, it's the syllabus, but it's not the process. And so I think I would feel differently about it. And there are some scholars that I have seen progressively share, you know, their thoughts, their process, rather than the performance of the act. Yes. And I think the performance of the act itself, there's nothing wrong with it if it's also coupled with what you're actually learning and having to say it out loud. Because I think that, but I also understand that there's a degree of comfort in, like, creating a list and not necessarily sharing your thoughts online. But it almost, to me, feels like the channels and the accounts that will make just lists of books, and people will save them, and people will, like, add them to their cart, and they'll, like, you know, like, the act in the kind of, like, consumerist, like, listing of things, rather than in the process
of engagement and attention, right?
And so I think the problem that you and I are coming up against, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can just tell me if I'm wrong, is that the challenge that we have with it is not the curriculum itself. It's the curriculum in and of itself on its own, without any kind of follow-up or any type of, like, shared engagement around the material itself. It's not generating conversation.
Yeah. Because ultimately, going back to what we said right at the beginning, is that you need to challenge yourself to learn. Yes. Learning doesn't just happen. It's something that requires the tension. It's something that requires that difficulty, that sense of actually engaging, being in dialogue with. And it doesn't have to be on social media. It can be around a dinner table. It could be, you know, with friends, with family, with people that are trusted. But if you are just consuming, rather, it's that passive consumption rather than active engagement argument. And I feel that the trend of it tends to that idea of passive consumption, more than active engagement.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think in that active engagement, that the process of thinking, we experience this idea of empathy. Mm-hmm. And this idea of looking at a different set of people, of circumstances, of historical context, whatever it may be, whatever you would like to focus on. And you get that sense of learning as a means of relatability, learning as a means of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, thinking about how you would have reacted in these sets of circumstances. And I think that comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, as this idea of looking at your learning, looking at the circumstances, the history, mm-hmm. the narrative, all this kind of stuff, as a person who is standing there right next to you, right next to whoever it is in the Cork Asylum, right next to the patient, thinking what are they thinking about? How are they mm-hmm. reacting? How are they presenting themselves? What is their narrative? What is the narrative of the world around you at that point? And I do think that this in and of itself has power. Mm-hmm. It has power to make us not only empathize with a broader group, a group outside of ourselves, but it creates that power to think for ourselves and to think critically and challenge comfortably, challenge from a space of knowledge, mm-hmm. which is something that I am so uncomfortable with. Any form of conflict, I am like, I am out of here. Thank you very much. But for me, that's actually been something that I have picked up more from learning, is where I feel more comfortable challenging and standing my ground in circumstances, in discussions, in debates, because I have that backing, I have that power of knowledge that drives that. Mm-hmm. And for me, I find that is a conversation that we haven't really delved into, this idea of learning and the for want of a better word, the benefit of it.
Okay, yes.
That was very tangential. That wasn't in my notes at all. That just went.
That's okay.
It went onto a different plane. But I wonder, from your side, has there been these moments in lifelong learning for you in your academic journey? Have there been these experiences that you've had where learning has taught you something about yourself? Yeah.
How do I want to say this? I think it makes you realize how easily manipulated human beings actually are.
Yes.
Like how easily you are willing to jump on board with someone, and how easily you can somebody can shape your ideas with, it's not even that they have a strong enough argument. And I think like understanding the devices by which somebody is able to convince you of a new idea or to convince you of a particular truth and being aware of it.
Yes.
I went into my time at UCLA, and I remember I took an Afro-Indigenous history class. And I this moment like sticks with me, and it makes me feel so embarrassed now. But at the time, I remember we were talking about the Lewis and Clark expedition, and I was talking about Sacagawea or Sacagawea, depending on who you ask. I don't know the proper pronunciation, but I remember there was a conversation about her agency, and I remember saying something so, just like, looking back on it just feels so ignorant, but that I had made a comment of that she had like wanted to be there and that she had like wanted to help. And somebody was like, how do you know that? In what way would you know that? And I just remember it stopped me in my tracks. And I remember, one, I felt like very embarrassed for having had this thought and also having no evidence for that thought. And realizing just how much this kind of narrative of westward expansion and the like nationalist project, how I, as somebody in Black studies, still held on to it. And I could not tell you the root of where I came up with that idea or why I felt that. And it just made me realize that in being challenged in that moment, I was like, oh, I really don't know. And I was so confident. Like, I made this statement and just got knocked off my silly little pedestal. And I remember, going back and like really trying to reframe the way I thought about the American project, the American state, indigenous sovereignty, indigenous agency. And it just made me realize just how easily manipulated I had been.
Yeah.
And trying to acknowledge, like, where is the basis of that knowledge? Like, where is the root? Where is it coming from? Why do you believe that? And that's, to me, the purpose of education, is like having an awareness of how somebody is trying to convince you of something. And it can be as simple as like somebody trying to just like convince you on where to go to eat. Like, it doesn't have to be, this grand understanding of, US politics and American, like the American past, and these grand ideas that actually have really serious repercussions. But just the knowledge that we're, in learning more about human beings throughout history, just how fragile and how easily shaped we can be.
Yeah. I think this is such a fascinating discussion, because this is something that I feel I have struggled with so much. I am, a chronic people pleaser. So if you wanted to go eat anywhere, I would be, I would just say yes.
No, Kate, you've got to stand your ground. Like, tell me that you want the pizza.
We'll try that in Oxford and we'll see how it goes down. But I think this is really interesting, because I feel like what has changed for me in my own sort of self-learning journey, not in research particularly, but especially in the self-learning that I've been doing, which has been a little bit of reading in the morning of some philosophy, some poetry collections, those kind of things. What I've really come across and what I have ended up journaling and uncovering in and of myself through those bits of self-learning is that idea of, well, a lot of this work that was done years and years and years ago is still very prevalent in today's day and age, and still, as you say, has that knock-on effect, has very severe consequences for the way that we view the world and the way that we formulate those opinions. And for me, being that chronic people pleaser, it has been that wake-up call. It has been that sense of, well, I'm I have my ideas, and my ideas are good. I am not going to sit back and just be silent for the sake of being silent, or for the sake of not rocking the boat, or for the sake of, keeping the peace. And I think so many people feel that they cannot vocalize their thoughts. They cannot say what they really feel for want of either confidence or for want of not feeling like they have a strong enough argument to justify that. And to those people, myself included, one thing that has helped me with that has actually been reading and learning and self-learning. And that has been one of the biggest takeaways that I just never expected. It's not something that I went in thinking that this is what I'm going to achieve off the back of it. And that ritual of journaling in the morning after I've read, after I've kind of sat with the thoughts, sat with its applicability and how I reflect on it and what my feelings are, exploring my preconceived ideas of what the world is. I think that has just been something that I had no idea would be impactful in this whole self-learning journey. And I think that's truly amazing.
The other thing I didn't expect is that it just opens so many doors to connection that were otherwise closed to you. I'm trying to think of a specific example, but oftentimes I used to enter like public spaces, or I'd go to a party or something and just kind of feeling like I don't have anything in common with these people. I don't have anything to say to them. I don't work in the same industry. I don't have the same interests. And there's the one side where I think, especially, I don't know if it's, I guess, I feel like as women, we're kind of taught like, okay, you need to have like a general knowledge of like these couple of things. That way you're at least interesting to men. Like, I will never forget somebody telling me that I needed to like have a basic understanding of football. Otherwise I was never going to find somebody to date. I was like,
good thought.
Ridiculous.
It's mad.
So I think that there's this desire to like acquire knowledge for the sake of the posture, the sake of being able to be in that room. And I think that's slightly different than being curious, being a good listener, being somebody willing to learn, and seeing just kind of where that takes you. And I have found in particular, like reading more, honestly, romantasy. I haven't read much in the last year, but in reading romantasy, I've made so many random friends, like in a bookshop, or I've like made eye contact with somebody on the tube, and like there's just like this knowing smile that you both have known, like what's going on in this book. We know what happened on chapter 45. And there's something really cool about having a diversity of knowledge that just makes it so that way you can engage with people that you otherwise would not, you would have had maybe trouble finding common ground.
Yeah.
And that goes beyond reading. Like that, that's, having experiences, that's going and like saying yes. I was talking to my partner about this, I think it was last week, because he has a friend who plays golf, and he's like, I would never play golf. I don't want to play golf and whatnot. And I was like, if you just had the openness to going and playing a round of golf and being really shit at it.
And seeing what it's about.
If you just had an open mind about it, you would see Tom probably 40% more every year than you do right now. You probably see him 2-3 times a year right now. But what if you got to see him once a month? Because you now have this common ground, and you don't have to like it. You just have to engage in it.
Yeah.
Just to be open to it. And I think that's, I mean, it's a slight tangent from learning, but the same kind of principles apply.
No, I think it's really amazing to talk about because, and we have diverged. We haven't gone down the path of our notes at all, which is great. I love that because I think the one thing that is really special is in our learning journeys, nothing of what we have discussed has been experiences that we have learned from our research.
Yeah.
These are all experiences.
It has nothing to do with the 17th century.
It has nothing to do with the compulsory, in inverted commas, learning that you do through seminars or through university or through a degree or whatever the case may be. All of these experiences, all of these effects that both you and I have felt are from our own, from reading, from writing, from journaling, from experiences, from going to museums, from visiting art galleries, from having discussions with friends, from going outside of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
And feeling that tension, feeling that discomfort, and putting ourselves deliberately in that space in order to learn. And I think that is a beautiful way to think about the fact that an intellectual life, whatever is being put out on social media about personal curriculums or reading 50 books a year or whatever the case may be, it's not that. It's actually in the small day-to-day experiences of reading, writing, reflecting, experiencing, listening, rather than these sort of tangible, in inverted commas, things or the performance of such. It's in the process.
Yeah. I also think it's in the not having a boundary on it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I think what I found last year when I did have a reading goal of how many books I wanted to read, I wasn't reaching for the things that were challenging or the things that were intriguing in that moment or whatever it may be, because I had a goal in mind, like a number goal. And I also, I actually think the same way about like diversity goals. So the premise of it, I agree with, which is, actually actively and intentionally reading outside of your genre, reading outside of, authors of your own ethnicity or nationality or racial identity, reading outside of your language.
Yeah.
I agree with all of that. But in like setting a specific
reading goal, like a number, a numeric value to it, right?
There's something that just feels inorganic about it. Like
Absolutely.
I think learning should be an intentional, purposeful process whereby, as I said at the beginning, like you're exploring your curiosities, but you're also challenging yourself to engage in the stuff that and the material that you might not reach for naturally.
Yeah.
And asking, why don't I reach for that? And then trying to push yourself a bit further. And I think setting certain goals in a way feels
restrictive in that exploration.
It feels restrictive. And there's another word I would say. It doesn't seem to me to like actually allow the intention of learning to carry you as like kind of like hoity-toity as this is, like carry you where it will, by setting a set reading goal or setting a set curriculum. We don't give ourselves enough space to go down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. And I think this ties in really nicely with our next episode that we are going to be recording, which is Book Talk helping or harming literary culture? and I have so many thoughts. so many thoughts. We want to finish off this episode with something we like to call the letterbox. Now, given this is our first episode, I'm not sure we have a question from any of our current listeners, but we will be asking you all to send us a question that we will answer at the end of each episode. But if you have enjoyed the space, please do show us your support. We're very excited to be here. And thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.